I will now turn the call over to Dr. Nader Pourhassan.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for being on this call. As of about an hour ago, CytoDyn has requested from the FDA to grant CytoDyn an emergency use authorization for leronlimab based on CD10 data for mild to moderate COVID-19 population. With that said, I would like to first discuss the results of our phase 2 clinical trial CD10. What is good outcome of a given phase 2 and what is bad outcome? A best case scenario for any phase 2 is to be able to achieve a primary endpoint with a statistically significant value or any secondary endpoint with a statistically significant value. Now, these items, these endpoints are listed on a phase 2 because this is a proof of concept. So a sponsor of a drug development can find out which item wants to be the primary endpoint for the phase 3 that will follow a successful phase 2. Obviously, safety is very, very important. So a bad outcome would be if there is any problem with the safety that is not resolvable, or missing all your secondary endpoints and primary endpoints. That's a worst case scenario. In regards to our study, many questions have come. Did we meet our primary endpoint? Meeting your primary endpoint, that means you have to have a clinical significant value, and if the value is much better in the drug versus placebo, then that becomes statistically significant. If it's not statistically significant, but clinically significant, then your phase 3 will do the same thing as phase 2, but with a higher number of patients. So we hit that situation. We hit the primary endpoint in regards to clinical significance. That means we can use that primary endpoint for our phase 3 to follow. If the agency wants us to do a phase 3, we can use the same primary endpoint, and instead of having 75 or 85 patients, we will do the calculation. We will need higher size trial. Gilead had done that by changing the size of their trial, as a lot of big biopharma do an interim analysis and change the number N to a higher number. We could do that, and that would give us a successful phase 3 with the same primary endpoint that we have now. But something happened to this trial. Something fantastic we have discovered. We discovered that there is a secondary endpoint that we believe is even more important than our primary endpoint, and we have achieved statistically significant value for this, which is the so-called NEWS2, NEWS2, which is the update version of NEWS, NEWS, which is National Early Warning Score. NEWS2 assesses the degree of illness that points out to any need for critical care intervention. This means we lowered this risk of having this combination of 7 parameters that constitute the NEWS score, and we have done it by 250% better than placebo. And these 7 parameters are very important parameters. Let's look at them. Their respiratory rate, oxygen saturation, supplemental oxygen temperature, systolic blood pressure, heart rate, and level of consciousness. So these are very important parameters that are used to give you a score. Our score was 50% in leronlimab versus 20% in placebo. That was statistically significant. That means the risk of critical care intervention due to use of leronlimab was reduced by 2.5 times. And our safety has been very amazing. We had more serious adverse events. The number of serious adverse events in this study is a little bit tricky because the randomization was 2-to-1, 2 patients in leronlimab versus 1 patient in placebo. So to equate them, we multiply the number of events in placebo by 2 so we can equate how they compared. When we do that, there was 70% of the SAEs had happened in a placebo. 70% of the AEs had happened in placebo. This is amazing result. And we are very excited to file for emergency use authorization in many different countries, and we are going to update the shareholders that this goes forward. But just let's assume, for the sake of assumption, that no country give us emergency use authorization. Then we have to do a phase 3. And what is the chance of us being able to hit our primary endpoint if it's news? And how many patients do we need to do a phase 3? Well, a phase 3, the number of patients is decided by the sponsor, which would be us. And we have to choose a number that give us a good chance at hitting our primary endpoint. We hit our secondary endpoint, news. And if news is going to be our primary endpoint, then the phase 3 should be about 75 to 85 patients. And the other factor here is the safety. Usually phase 3 is 400 or 500 or more because you want to demonstrate safety. We already demonstrate safety in about 900 patients before in HIV and some cancer and quite a bit of COVID-19 patients already. So if we would have to do a phase 3 of 100 patients, let's just assume that, and we can do interim analysis with 50. Our sites are ready to go. We have enrolled already. It will be patients that would have clinical score of 4 or more. We learned that we are effective in that population, and we're going to make it the first 3 days for that. This would be our secondary endpoint, which is the symptom score, and news would be our primary endpoint. So with that, let us hear from the 2 doctors that we have on the call and see what was their take. Dr. Scott Kelly first, and then we go to Dr. Jacob Lalezari. Dr. Kelly, go ahead, please.
Sure, absolutely, and thank you, Nader. I am incredibly encouraged by the results in our mild to moderate COVID-19 trial. The National Early Warning Score, or NEWS2, provides objective evidence of clinical deterioration. As a clinician, I think it is important to clarify the concept of subjectivity versus objectivity. When you look at a clinical symptom scale, there is an element of subjectivity based on patient interpretation of what they are feeling. Take, for example, myalgias. Do your muscles ache or do they not ache? Although it is a symptom of COVID-19, it is also a symptom of other disease processes such as rheumatological diseases, a side effect of certain medications, or as my patients tell me, I ache all the time. I'm just getting older. I hurt every day of my life. NEWS2 is based on physiological parameters and is less dependent on patient subjectivity. We just showed statistical significance in a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled study from a tool that helps identify which patients will deteriorate and require prompt critical care intervention. I think that's remarkable. The mild to moderate population is 81% of the population of COVID-19 patients, and as of this morning, there were 20,500,000 worldwide COVID-19 infections and 747,000 deaths. And I believe we can all agree that this number is vastly underestimate those currently infected with COVID-19. I think NEWS2 is an objective way to take a physiological snapshot of a patient and determine which patients are at risk for rapidly deteriorating that can be measured over time. Nader?
Thank you so much, Dr. So, Dr. Lalezari, could you please tell us your take on the results that we achieved?
Sure. Thank you, Nader, and hello, everybody. My take is that it's hard to imagine the outcome of this study being any better. The population that we went after with mild to moderate is a very difficult population in which to show an effect. Certainly no other sponsor has shown an effect in this group. And it's important to remember that we're proposing that leronlimab is an immunomodulator where we're probably going to see our greatest impact in patients with either moderate or severe disease. and the population here was generally pretty healthy. So I'm surprised and actually stunned at the results that we were able to show. The primary endpoint, I was involved in selection of that endpoint, and it was really kind of plucked out of the air from what we had done previously years ago in influenza. And as Scott mentioned, a lot of this is subjective muscle aches and cough, and so it's not a very hard endpoint. But nonetheless, what the study showed us is that we were able to reduce symptoms in patients that had measurable symptoms at baseline, which tells us a lot about when to use the drug. If a patient has absolutely minimal symptoms, it's probably too early for leronlimab to have an effect. But in patients that were 4 or greater, the drug did what we asked it to, which was reduce symptoms. But far more important and consequential as a clinician, whether it was chosen as the primary endpoint or not, are what we saw not only in News 2, which predicts pulmonary collapse, but these serious adverse events. These are the things that are clinically far more important than whether your muscle ache is a grade 1 or a grade 2. So the fact that we were able to not only move the clinical symptoms, but move these much more serious endpoints, it's hard for me to imagine this study having a better outcome with leronlimab. And, when we look back at CD10, I think we can say that we still don't know whether leronlimab will be a double, a triple, or a home run. We're going to have to wait and see what CD12 shows us. But the results of CD10 later rest the question of whether leronlimab works at all in COVID-19. It unquestionably does, based on clinical outcomes and then these much more serious outcomes, SAEs and News 2. So the drug works, and what I think remains unknown is again, whether it's a double or triple or home run, and I think we have to wait to CD12 to find that out. In the meantime, I think we have our first drug that actually works in COVID-19. And I'll leave it there, Nader.
Thank you so much, Jay. So the CD12, the other trial that we have for COVID-19, our enrollment is at 175, as everybody have been told. At 195, we will do interim analysis. So to update you on other items is not to distract you from this great result, but just to let you know how our product is moving forward in HIV. There is a professor of university that I'm not going to give the name at this time, but he has said that when he did animal study of leronlimab or any results that he got from us, and he presented it to the group of scientists, always everybody's eyes just pop out. They say, wow, where did you get this product? I mean, having right now 49 patients that are in extension of a monotherapy with HIV, where patients put away all their drug and only use simple subcutaneous injection at home once a week, 49, 5 of those patients have gone almost 6 years, some past 6 years, about 10 of them are about 3 years into monotherapy. This product works, in our opinion, because if they don't take the product for 2-3 weeks, the viral load goes through the roof. So we're very excited to have leronlimab entrusted to us to take the development path forward. And with that, I want everybody to know that because there are many indications that we are going to go forward, NASH, cancer, MS, and perhaps long haulers for COVID-19 would be another trial we will pursue. We have asked our Chief Medical Officer, who happens to be the chairman of our board, Dr. Scott Kelly, to gather a top key opinion leader in every one of these indications and sign an agreement for them to be in our scientific advisory team. We will put their bios and their pictures on our website very soon, so everybody can see what kind of scientists are trusting leronlimab and are excited about our product. But with that, let me have Dr. Scott Kelly give us an overview of where we are right now and who all have signed so far to be in our scientific advisory board. Dr. Kelly, please.
Yes, so I'm extremely proud to announce that our scientific advisory board continues to attract some of the most well-respected clinical and research leaders in medicine. As a quick recap, the following physicians have signed and agreed to be on our CytoDyn Scientific Board of Advisors. Dr. Gero Hutzer, he is the gentleman that cured the first patient of HIV through bone marrow transplant for leukemia. Dr. Hope Rugo, the Director of Breast Oncology at UCSF. Dr. Eric Minenberg, a hematology oncology specialist. Dr. Lish Nulovu, a specialist in HIV, immunology, HIV and aging, and cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. And Dr. Jonah Sasha, a specialist in molecular biology and immunology with a particular interest in HIV PrEP and cure. We have 3 new additions that I would like to share with you today. We also have additional commitments from physicians in the field of oncology, pulmonary and lung transplant, and infectious disease with a particular emphasis on COVID-19. I'll begin with Dr. Richard Maziarz. Dr. Maziarz received his medical doctorate at Harvard University and completed his immunology fellowship at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Dr. Maziarz specializes in bone marrow transplantation and blood cancers. His areas of interest include leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, graft-versus-host disease, and innovative treatments such as CAR-T therapy. His research interest covers how the immune system recovers after a bone marrow transplant and how the immune system works to fight cancer. At last count, he has 263 publications and has authored 38 book chapters and reviews and has extensive research and teaching experience. The second is Dr. Norman Galis. Dr. Galis is recognized as one of the country's leaders in the field of rheumatology. He is board certified in internal medicine and rheumatology. He has been a principal investigator in over 200 clinical trials for new pharmaceutical products for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, lupus, lupus nephritis, gout, and Sjogren's syndrome. He has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, on multiple television news shows, and serves on the editorial board of Rheumatology News. He is the past medical director for the Rheumatology Division at Cardinal Health. And third, Dr. Mazen Noureddin. Dr. Noureddin is a hepatologist at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. He completed his residency at University of Southern California and completed a hepatology fellowship at the NIH and gastroenterology fellowship at University of California, San Diego. He has been involved in many breakthrough clinical trials targeting new therapies in patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, including those with advanced fibrosis and cirrhosis. His focus is on the underlying mechanisms of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and NASH, liver transplant, liver cancer, new imaging modalities, and exploring new treatments. He has conducted several original studies that have been featured in publications such as Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and the American Journal of Gastroenterology, among many others. In closing, I will say that I think the caliber of talent that we are attracting to the CytoDyn Scientific Board of Advisors is a strong vote of confidence in the potential of leronlimab and will continue to get stronger. Nader?
Thank you so much. So we will go to Q&A now, but before we go to Q&A, I just want to make sure I make a correction that our secondary endpoint news was in the leronlimab arm was 2.5 times better than placebo, which is 150% better, not 250% better, which I misspoke and had an error on that. So with that, please, let's go to Q&A.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question at this time, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. The confirmation tone will indicate that your line is in the question queue. You may press star 2 if you would like to remove your question from the queue. For participants using speaker equipment, it may be necessary to pick up your handset before pressing the star keys. Our first question comes from the line of Yi Chen from H.C. Wainwright. Please proceed with your question.
Hi, thank you for taking my questions. Congratulations on the data. So for the clinical assessment in terms of total clinical symptom score, the placebo got a score of 71%. Is that score typical among mild to moderate COVID-19 patients?
So that's a very good question, and I will have to ask our regulatory director, Dr. Kushdori, but Jay Lalezari and Scott Kelly, do you guys know if that's a typical number?
I don't know that we've seen a lot of reports in mild to moderate to no, but it certainly would depend on the severity of illness of the folks enrolled in the intervention. So I'm not sure I'd use the word typical.
Right, and I would agree. I mean, I just think it's about the multi-system, inflammation that's involved in COVID-19, and I think it's variable. I mean, I think we're all learning about this disease in real time.
Okay. Any other questions?
Between total clinical symptom score and the National Early Warning Score 2, which one do you think could be used by the FDA in terms of granting regulatory or emergency authorization?
So the fact that we had a clinically significant value for symptom scores at day 3, that tells us that the impact is very quick. And the fact that the news has reduced the risk, that shows the risk of patients who are at need of critical intervention, that's 2.5 times better. So with all that said, we have to just wait for the FDA to tell us what to do. Do they want us to do phase 3? Do they want to give us emergency use agreement? We just can't speak for them.
Nader, I would just add that the day 3 results are great, and they certainly comport with what we reported from the emergency IND patients. So what that's telling us is that the mechanism and the activity that we thought we had is there. But in terms of the importance, the risk for pulmonary decompensation, the NEWS2 endpoint, if I were the regulatory agency, I would point to that and say that is where we're going to pivot. Because that is ultimately what is most important.
And this is Scott, I would agree with Jay, just due to the objectivity of the NEWS2 versus the subjectivity of the symptom scale.
Do you expect to meet with the FDA again to discuss the next step for this patient population?
So we have just sent our top-line report and a letter to the FDA requesting that if they would give us guidance in regards to granting us emergency use agreement, or if they want to meet with us or whatever they wanted to do, we're going to wait for them, and when we hear back, we will inform everybody.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So before we go to the next question, we do have some questions that came in, and Mike Mulholland is going to read some of them. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Nader, first, recently you've mentioned that one patient has died in this study. Can you provide all the listeners today with some more information about this event?
Yes, so this patient was a 50-year-old female, and the patient had history of substance abuse. The patient symptom score when they come in was pretty high, and it reduced after 2 injections of leronlimab. It reduced by almost 60%. So it went from a high number to a low number. So this was a very good patient for leronlimab side in regards to the result. But then unfortunately, 33 days from day 0, the patient passed away, and the physician immediately said that was not related to our drug. Having said that, we are waiting to get the exact cause of death, and we don't have it as of right now. But it's not related to our product, so we don't have to have emergency reporting on that. Go ahead.
Okay. Another question for you, Nader. Recently, you've made reference more than once or so that major media and possibly big pharma were waiting in the wings for us to release formal trial results. We've now done that. I know it's either same day or within the last 24 hours, but we have no evidence yet that anything is forthcoming. Can you give us some additional color as to where we might be with respect to media response to our recent press release?
So the top-line report, as we had reported before, has been sent to the major media that we talk about, and we also are sending the top-line report to the major pharmaceutical who had asked for it. That transfer of top-line report is happening right now as we speak, as we just gave the top-line report to our business development, Dr. Brandon Ray and Dr. Scott Kelly.
Okay.
Okay, so operator, could you please go ahead with the next question?
Absolutely. Our next question comes from Jeff Pfeiffer, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please, Jeff.
Great. Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the update and the clarifications. I agree that the CD10 results are phenomenal. I have two questions, separate. One, probably more for Jay or Dr. Kelly. In a recent interview, Dr. Patterson talked about the amount of data that was being analyzed in this trial being about 30 to 40,000 data points. I was wondering if you could share some lights on possible information or other things that you can have gleaned about either COVID or leronlimab related to those data efforts that may be outside of the primary or secondary endpoints. And then I have one more question for Mr. Mulholland.
So your question is you want us to elaborate on the secondary endpoint, correct?
Or that there was a wealth of data collected. My understanding from the interview with Dr. Patterson that this was for diagnostic to understand more about COVID, but also the mechanism of action for leronlimab.
Yes, so let me make that very clear because there was a lot of question about this. All of those blood samples that we collected, FDA looks at clinical outcome, not the laboratory outcome. Now, we are analyzing those data, but again, we have to have assay validation and certain other things before we can go to FDA and say these are the result of a laboratory. So those we have not included in a top-line report, but we did look at them very, very closely. Don't get me wrong, but we have seen what we got from the clinical outcome, which was per protocol, and those are the ones that we are submitting. But Scott and Jay, do you guys have anything to add to that?
No, Nader, I think that's exactly correct. I mean, I really do. And I think in the mild to moderate population, you're not going to see as dramatic results necessarily as you'll see in the severe critical, but, we'll look at everything.
I would just add that two things. One, we're waiting on the virology. There was swabbing done, and so that'll be out with the final report. But I think what's interesting about CD10 is, I've been wondering where in the spectrum of illness leronlimab would make sense, particularly if suddenly we needed to treat everybody in the world, and we're talking about, hundreds of millions of doses potentially. And we thought going in that, it would coincide roughly with the time when patients started getting short of breath or were indicated for oxygen. And I think what CD10 is the data is teaching us is refining that a little bit, that it could even be before patients require oxygen, but after the point that they have anything more than minimal symptoms. And I think that becomes very important when you start talking about the international distribution of this drug and how you're going to get it out there in those quantities to have a good fix on when it's time to start treatment.
Great, thank you. My second question was for Mr. Mulholland. Just an update on uplisting to the NASDAQ. I think last time we were several weeks into a 6-week process. So.
Yeah, correct. We've not yet received a comment letter on our initial submission package. Thus, we have no further updates to provide. But I think it's important for everyone to note, however, that our 10-K is due to be filed with the SEC this Friday, August 14, and obviously our 10-K and audited financial statements will be an integral part of the exchange's review process of our application. Next question, please.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the line of Paul Sharpanoff, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Hello?
Go ahead, please.
My first question is for Mike Mulholland. And I was just wondering, when you guys talked about possible emergency use authorization for treating COVID in the past, you mentioned a top-line sales figure of $2.5 billion this year and $9 billion next year. I don't know whose statement that shows up on, but just in general, when you're looking at your pro formas, what kind of a net income margin are you looking at off that gross number?
Thanks for the question. To the best of my knowledge and recall, I've never commented on what our expectations are for future revenues. We have a ways to go. First and foremost, regulatory hurdles and approval. We do have our distribution networks in place, both for HIV as well as for COVID-19. So we're very pleased with our readiness if and when we obtain approval. Nader, do you have something to add, please?
And when we talk about this, I did talk about that, and I said if we do get approval, which we don't have that approval, everybody wanted to know how many vials do we have. We said that many number of vials that we will have this year if we were going to get approval, and if we were selling it at the price that was given to us from Remdesivir at that time, then the potential is $2.5 billion. We never said we're going to sell $2.5 billion this year. That was never said like that. But thank you for your question. Next, please.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Maureen Hydock, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, congratulations on the results. That's very impressive. And I liked what I heard around the advisory board. It sounds like there's quite a set of professionals who are well-versed in all of the various topics. However, I'm curious as to why Dr. Patterson, given his findings around RANTES and how Leronlimab's ability to quiet the cytokine storm, as well as return the body back to immunological homeostasis, why is not Dr. Patterson not on this advisory board with his impressive resume as well with everybody else's?
Yeah,
Thank
you for your question. Yes, absolutely. So we always assess everybody's capability for us to be in the advisory board. Dr. Scott Kelly does that. We ask questions from all of other people. Dr. Patterson has his own expertise. We did use his lab at one time. We are with a different lab at this time. But I, as a CEO for CytoDyn, have been trusted to make decisions like that, and I'm always good to explain those decisions at the time appropriate. We are very thankful to Dr. Patterson, and we are happy that we work together, but at this time, Dr. Patterson's lab is not being used. Next question, please.
Thank you. The next question comes from Peter Levine from Ameriprise Financial. Please proceed with your question. Okay, we will move on to our next question, which comes from the line of Mitchell Roffer, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Yes, congratulations on the great science and medical work that you've been doing. My challenge is I've been in science advisor and science consultancy business for 30 years, that while you're very strong in the academic sciences, you seem to be very weak in the marketing and the business detail. I would think that results like this, you would be sending out press releases not only to every major news outlet in the country, as well as the financial networks. I mean, I look at my financial newsletters, and I see nothing about the company, and if anything's been there 6 or 7 weeks ago.
Thank you. Next question. I'm going to answer this right now before we go to the next question, but allow me to explain. The press releases. I don't write the press releases myself. We have a team of people working. 2 press release experts. One of them is a Ph.D. medical doctor in this field. Then we run it by the attorneys. Then we run it by the regulatory team. We can't just say things that are outrageous and just put in the title, we are the best in the world or something like that, and then start sending it. There is rules and regulation. We have SEC rules. We have FDA rules. We have FINRA rules. We have to be a company that can go and uplist. If we don't have those things in order and we start being wild about these kind of things, then we're not going to be able to uplist. We're not going to be able to conduct business in a professional way. Next, please.
Our next question comes from Mark Lieber, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Hi, congratulations. It's very exciting. I asked this last time. Is there any further updates on the release of the studies and the papers that you said were coming out in the next couple of weeks? And that was a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you for that. I don't recall saying that those papers will be accepted in a couple of weeks. I did say that we are hoping for them to be submitted within a couple of weeks. Some major publications take time. 2 of the 3 papers we told you have been submitted, and I know about it. The third one, I don't know if it has been submitted. I don't have update. These are not our papers. These are the papers of the physicians who work on this. And in regards to papers in HIV, we now have a group of people that we hired to publish 5 different publications. They're going to work on those, starting with the extension of our CD01, which some patients have gone 6 years, then extension of CD03, which we have 44 patients, some gone at 3 years. We have the extension of CD02, the combination therapy extension that has some patients as much as 3 years. I mean, there is some major that we are working on, but just imagine taking on a product with all these indications and all these potential and every positive thing that we have. We are working on all of these at the same time, and we are not a very big company. Just want to make sure everybody knows. Mike Mulholland and his team, the way they work is incredible. And myself, I try to do everything I can to serve the shareholder along with our team. Next, please.
Our next question comes from Marty Martinez, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Hi, good afternoon. My question has been answered previously, so you can move on to the next one. But congratulations to everyone.
Thank you, Marty. Appreciate it. Next, please.
Thank you. Next comes from Michael Coy, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Hello, gentlemen. Outstanding work, I must say. Your patience and dedication and perseverance is demonstrated here manyfold. I have a quick question about your DSMB for phase 3. I've got 20 years of executive level pharmaceutical, large pharma experience, and I've been through many DSMB boards through my years. And I have a question about, did your DSMB only receive safety information from the phase 3 program, or did they also receive efficacy information from the phase 3 study?
Thank you for your question. Very good question. This was only a safety look, and if they wanted to do efficacy, it will be interim analysis, which we are very eager to get to that point, but that was a safety look. Next, please.
Our next question comes from the line of Roger McFeeters, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Yes, I wanted to know in your mild moderate study, how many patients actually went on to oxygen from both the leronlimab arm and the placebo arm?
So, no, thank you for the question. 2 patients needed mechanical ventilation, 1 in leronlimab, 1 in placebo. Placebo was 2-to-1 randomized, so if you're going to make the populations theoretically the same, it's 1-to-2. So 50% less mechanical ventilation need, theoretically changing the population was so that secondary endpoint also we were very strong, but because there was only 2, we didn't report that to the public. Next, please.
Our next question comes from Tony Reed with Millennium Investment Services. Please proceed with your question.
Hi, guys. Congrats, and more than anything, thank you all for your tireless efforts. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Two questions. The first is, I'm just curious, when you submit this information as you have to the FDA, is the process basically them just analyzing statistical data, or is there any opportunity for discourse? For instance, Dr. Lalezari, you speak so eloquently and passionately about the success of this trial. Is there any way to have that, verbal conversation with them to help in the approval process? First question.
No, that's a good question. Appreciate it, Tony. And so what we have done is we send a letter of request of emergency use agreement. as soon as we hear from them, then we know how they want to proceed. They might come back, for example, and say, we don't agree with you that we should give you emergency use agreement right now. Proceed with the phase 3 and give us your phase 3. Then we will immediately submit a protocol. But if they say we are looking at emergency use agreement more seriously, then they probably will ask for a sponsor to meet. So we have to wait for them to let us know how they want to proceed. Your second question, Tony?
Okay. Yeah, the second question is with respect to the attempt to get approval with these other countries, UK, EU, Israel, and so forth, Mexico. Is there reason to believe, through any discussions you've had with anyone at this point, that approval might be granted in advance of or in spite of the FDA's not granting approval themselves at this point? Or are these countries really, in your opinion, only going to be approving things once they're approved here?
No, that's a great question, Tony. And they are not connected, but the rules are pretty much the same in all countries. But we do have some countries have told us, the representative of person who's talking to them, that they are very excited to give us approval based upon what we said in the press release. I don't want to get into that. Then that might not happen. So I just don't want to set that expectation. I just want you to know that there are countries that right now are asking us to talk to them very quickly, and we are sending them the top-line report as early as tomorrow. And I'm having talk with one of them right after this call. So definitely we want to pursue those countries, and they are separated from FDA in the United States. Each country has their own regulatory body. Thank you for your question. Next, please.
Nader, if I could just interrupt.
Go ahead, please.
The last caller had asked about the incidence of oxygen use, and you had shared the mechanical ventilation. I just want to add in the oxygen data, and that is that in the modified intent-to-treat population, approximately 84% of subjects on leronlimab did not require oxygen compared to about 79% on placebo. So it was a delta of about 5%, and we elected not to include that in the press release.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much, Dave. Very helpful. Next question, please.
Our next question comes from Paul Firth with Wedbush Securities. Please proceed with your question.
Yes, good afternoon, Nader, Dr. J, Dr. Kelly. Congratulations. So a couple quick questions here. In regards to the EUA approval, how soon, realistically, would you get an answer back? I mean, would we be talking about a week's time? I mean, we're obviously in the middle of a pandemic.
I mean, just imagine if I say a couple of weeks or so and just guess at it, and then I'm going to have all kind of angry shareholders saying 2 weeks has gone. I have no idea. Right. This is the first time we're doing such a thing. The pandemic is very new to the world. People are trying to come up with an articulated way to help the approval of each drug. We don't know each country, how they're going to approach it, but we will let the public know as soon as we can. We stay very clear with the shareholders and constantly update everybody. Sometimes that backfires on us, but we're willing to take that beating. Your second question, please?
Okay. On the BLA follow-up meeting, any update there on?
Yeah, so we submitted the Type A meeting request on August 5th. We are hopeful to hear from FDA soon. There is a 30-day window of waiting usually, but Type A we have heard that it could be sooner. But again, we can't promise any date. We just have to wait for it. But we have submitted as of a week ago. Thank you for your question. Next, please.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Robert Smith, a private investor. Please proceed.
Hello. Operator, next question, please.
We'll move on to our next question, which comes from John Lasaver with a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for taking my question. I have a question on CD12, the 195 enrollment point. It seems like we're at maybe 175, I believe you said earlier.
Correct.
Correct. Do you have any expectation of how long it will take to enroll the other the other remaining portion?
Yeah. So I'm learning not to give updates. I mean, my own guess, because if the guess is off with few weeks, we're going to get angry shareholders. And in the past, as we know, biotech takes years and years to get things done. But we're hopeful to get it done soon. But we have quite a bit of sites that have initiated. Dr. Chris Reckner has done a fantastic job in the CD10. If you guys remember, all of a sudden we got 25 patients enrolled. Dr. Scott Kelly brought him to our company. And with CD12, he just got a few sites set up for us. So we're hopeful that it will pick up, and we will update everybody again as we get information. Thank you for your question. Next, please.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Jim Roberts with AOCI. Please proceed with your question.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. And again, I echo congratulations on an incredibly fine project and hard work, especially you, Nader.
Thank you.
Is there any precedent for the request you've made with the findings to the FDA of getting approved without doing a phase 3? Is there any precedent of another company where they've approved something like this for emergency use, or is this kind of a pretty new thing?
So the remdesivir got emergency use agreement, and as we know, their primary endpoint was 11-day discharge versus 15 days, I believe. So other than that, I don't know any other that got emergency use approval.
Did that they got that, or was it a phase 2?
I'm sorry. No, that was a phase 3. I'm sorry. I don't know anybody that got after phase 2, but I can tell you that the rules in the guidelines from FDA is if you do phase 2 for any indication and it's an unmet medical need, then you have a chance to get a breakthrough designation and perhaps even approval if the disease is deadly. This is not we keep saying everybody recovers, right? So mild to moderate. This is not the deadly part of the COVID-19, but it's very bad because 80 or 87% of the patients who are in that situation transmit to others who could die. So that to me makes that unmet medical need. So to make that argument, is it going to go very well with the FDA and they agree with it? I just have no idea. They might say, no, we don't agree, and we do phase 3. Just keep in mind, if we do end up doing a phase 3, all of our sites are set for that. We will do it in the moderate, not mild to moderate. We'll do it with the patients with the symptom score of over 4. We do it with NEWS being our primary endpoint, and so forth. Thank you. Next question, please.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Doug Vincent, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
I am very encouraged, as you are, by both the SAE data and the NEWS2 data, and so congratulations for that, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I think of the some of the questions that have been raised today could be more easily and succinctly answered by having perhaps a webcast where you explicitly show the endpoints that you select and display your data and the significant points that you've identified. Does your company have any intention of holding such webcasts either for the CD10 data or the CD12 data when it's appropriate?
We could do that, perhaps. That's a good idea. We would definitely wait for our rest of the data to come in. CD10 data has to have 42 days follow-up. Some patients do not report, but the protocol calls for 42-day follow-up. So once we get that, once we get the CSR ready to go, then we perhaps could do that. So thank you for your question. Next, please.
Our next question comes from Alan Kane, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Yeah, no, my question was answered. I pressed 2. It was NASDAQ timing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next, please.
Thank you. Next is Eric Smith, a private investor. Please proceed with your question.
Hello. Congratulations on your results. I know you all have been working very hard.
Thank you.
2 questions. The first is on the data set, the full data set. When will that be released, or when will the paper that you spoke of be released with that data? The second question is, it seems there's now almost 4 or 5 countries where you're making applications for approval, but the potential production of the drug, at least near term, seems to be significantly less than what the demand would be. Am I missing something there?
So no, that is correct. That the demand is going to be much higher, as Dr. J. Lalezari said a few times. The countries that we are going after, the purpose is to get approval at least in one country and start being able to show the data how the drug works in a commercial setting, and perhaps use it as a phase 4 data, which would be very valuable while we have revenue for the shareholders. So we will have, as we said before, about 1.1 to 1.2 million vials. That's quite a bit of vials for a small company like ours. If we are very successful, then we can perhaps ramp up the manufacturing if the government helps us with the finances, and I have no doubt that the government will if we do get approval. But again, we have to take one step at a time. And the full set of data for this study, we have already given the data to the FDA for what we need to see if we can get approval or go to phase 3. But the rest of that data will come out, but by the time it comes out, we probably have interim analysis, which would be more exciting to everybody to know what happened with CD12, and perhaps have the long hauler study for COVID-19 started, and so forth. But we will share those information. Thank you. Next question, or this should be probably last question, or two more questions perhaps. Go ahead. Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Dima Thompson from Honor Oak Village. Please proceed with your question.
Thank you for taking my call and holding this press conference or conference call this afternoon. I appreciate it, and echo my sentiments of congratulations to all of you for almost a year's work on COVID-19. And as people die day to day, I know we had some questions about the EUA of the FDA here in the U.S., but let us just say that the United Kingdom or Israel or one of these other countries comes back with you and approves authorization. Do you have to tell the FDA here about it? Are there any protocols for how that would proceed or work?
No, that's a great question. Thank you for your kind words. We will definitely communicate that with the FDA here, no matter what. Our ultimate goal is to get approval in the United States and have this product being used in our own country. So we will definitely provide those, but as we said, we just are at the very beginning. We are learning how to go forward with this situation, as this pandemic is new to everybody. Thank you for your question. Next, please.
Our next question comes from Dr. John Appelis with Northleaf Partners. Please proceed with your question.
Thank you. I want some clarification and a couple of questions around this issue. You're describing the patients as mild to moderate. Am I correct that these patients are all hospitalized? And then, if depending on the answer, I have another question.
Yeah, Dr. Lalezari, could you answer that?
Yes, I asked Kush this morning for a breakdown on the mild to moderate, but my understanding is the majority of these patients are not hospitalized. And certainly, by definition, none of them are on oxygen. So they all had O2 sats at baseline above 93%. But most are not in the hospital.
Yep.
So these patients were presented as outpatients to clinics or to practitioners?
Correct.
This is Scott. I think that's an important point, if you don't mind me saying that, when you think about the administration of a subcutaneous versus an IV infusion, I think this becomes a very important point, that it's a very convenient way to deliver this medicine to patients, and especially in an outpatient setting.
Yeah, that is a very important point, and I think it should be emphasized in what you're saying to people. The route of administration is cardinal in how the therapies are applied. Remdesivir, for example, is totally impractical in early stages of the disease. Early stages of the disease have to be on an outpatient basis within office practice or outpatient clinics, and as such, oral therapy, of course, is ideal, but sub-Q, especially if it's long-acting, could be a reasonable means of administration. IV is certainly not. So in describing the results here, I think that should be emphasized, and that could be generalized to a large population.
No, excellent point, and we are making that already in our application to the FDA. We have put that the importance of that being sub-Q also, the advantage we have over IV over other products. Is there any more question from you?
What is your dosing schedule to anticipate? Is it one single dose, or do you have a schedule for multiple doses?
So it's two injections, one at day 0 we call, and one at day 8, so 7 days apart. Okay.
And you reach statistical significance on day 3 in terms of the clinical response, but at day 10 and 14, there was no difference between the drug and placebo, or was there a difference but did not reach statistical significance?
So day 7 and 14 for symptom score in the per protocol, it was not significant, so we didn't even talk about it. We only talk about the one that has clinical significance, 3 days, which we thought it was the most important part. Thank you for your question. Let's go to the last question, and then I'll give the final comments before we close the call.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the line of Antonio Bautista, a private investor. Please proceed with your question. Mr. Bautista, your line is live. You may proceed with your question.
Okay, I think we're over the time anyway, so let me go ahead with my final comments, please, operator. So thank you everyone for participating in this call. I want to make sure everybody understands that we have 2 trials, one CD10 that we now have results from randomized double-blinded placebo control, and the CD12 interim analysis is at 195. We are thinking about getting involved in a long hauler study. Patients who have COVID-19, they get better and they don't have the virus, but then they still have problems, very difficult problems, some of them. I believe there is over 50,000 patients like that. We do have centers that have reached out to us and they want to do this study, and they have plenty of patients in that regard. We also are working very hard to get our Type A meeting very much ready to go for the meeting time, and be able to ask FDA for guidance on our monotherapy approval and combination therapy approval, whatever is that they need. We want to make sure we understand it and explain to the FDA our position, and be able to file the BLA for combination, and hopefully get some guidance of what we need to do for getting monotherapy approval, now that we are giving all the efficacy data even from our monotherapy data to the FDA. NASH trial is very close to getting initiated. All the work have been done. Dr. Scott Kelly has been very much involved with Amarex to get that trial set up. We will be looking at other trials as we go forward, as we said, MS and Alzheimer, and we will update everybody as we go forward. In regards to uplisting, Mike Mulholland is in contact with NASDAQ, and we will let the shareholders know as soon as there's any development. Any situation that comes from another country for us to get approval, or anything that we get updated, we will immediately update the shareholders. So with that, thank you very much everyone for being on the call. Have a good day. Bye-bye.